Hey there, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Neighbors Helping Neighbors, brought to you by the Robertson County Democratic Party. I'm one of your co-hosts, Kaylee, and those of you on video will see I'm joined by a special guest today. We have Joshua Sales, a candidate for Congressional District 7, here with us today.
It's so good to be back on.
But yeah, we were so happy to have you back. So as always, before we get into the discussion, just some important dates, quick call outs. So a reminder that our typical Wednesday weekly ICE protests have been moved to Mondays now, just I think to align better with kind of the presence that we're seeing at the courthouse from ICE agents. So those have been moved to Mondays, but still at the same time from 8:30 to 11 in the morning. If you can make it the full time, if you can only stop by for 20 minutes, whatever you can do is much appreciated. And then we are still continuing our Springfield Speaks protest on the corner of Tom Austin and Memorial on Saturdays. And again, those are at a noon time from 9 a.m. to 12 noon. Again, we just shift that because now that it is ungodly hot outside, we do not want everyone standing out in the miserable heat. So trying to catch the earlier, cooler hours of the day. And then last but not least, which will lead right into our discussion for today, is the primary is coming up in August in a couple weeks. So a lot of deadlines have already passed. You know, it's too late to register to vote if you haven't done that already. But the last day to request an absentee ballot is July 27th. So you still have a little bit of a time to request an absentee ballot. And then early voting is open now through August 1st. So, and then if, again, election day is August 6th. So if you can't go early vote, election day is the 6th. But those are your important dates. And as always, I will have those in this episode's description. So that takes us to Mr. Sales. Those of you who are regular listeners or have tuned in before, Josh has been here before. But would you like to give a quick intro just for people who maybe haven't heard from you yet?
Yeah. So for those who don't know me, my name is Joshua Warren Sales. I am one of your Democratic candidates for Tennessee Congressional District 7 to be your U.S. representative in the House. I am a U.S. Army veteran. I am a UT alum, and I am a current high school English teacher who just wants a better outcome and a better future for my students than what they're currently facing.
That is not a bad want to have. I think that is a good desire. So for those of you who might be wondering why we have Josh on a second time, so part of the reason is, it is election season. We want to get candidate exposure out there as much as we can for any candidates that are interested. But also, when we first interviewed you, all of the redistricting had just happened. We didn't even know that you were going to have opponents in the primary. We thought it was just going to be you and Van Epps going through to November. So we wanted to have kind of a second chance for both you and the listeners to answer maybe a little bit harder questions, get more of a comparison between you and the other candidates. So hopefully this helps you listeners at home kind of get a better idea, rather than, I think our first episode was more of just get to know the guy you're voting for rather than now you have a choice to make.
Yeah, there's been a lot of changes happening. Tennessee 7 went from about 14 counties down to 8, shifting from what I like to call the western portion of Middle Tennessee to now the northern portion.
Sure.
So there's been a demographic change for sure. And then the biggest thing on the Democratic side, as you mentioned, is the fact that this primary has now started with Darden Copeland, Vincent Dixie, Salel Holloway, myself, and then the write-in candidate, Lori Bergman.
Yes, it has been a big switch up. And not just the district, but just, I'm sure, your campaign strategy and that had to have been a huge upheaval almost of just, start from scratch almost of.
It wasn't, because when I first pulled my ticket, I thought there'd be a primary. Right. Vincent Dixie had pulled a petition to run. He just never turned it in the first time. And I very much kind of imagined my campaign being one where I would be a voice on the left, kind of pushing the rhetoric and getting Darden Copeland, Vincent Dixie, people who ran in the special election last year, to kind of actually answer some tougher questions and be faced with someone standing there who knew a bit more of the numbers and the details and pushing from a more millennial perspective.
And so that kind of brings me to the first question I wanted to get into, talking about all of your opponents. So a couple weeks ago, we had a Democratic candidate forum at the Springfield High School.
Yeah.
And congratulations is in order, because we held a straw poll after that debate, I guess, if that's what you want to call it. And you came out the winner of that straw poll. And we were kind of going back and forth prior to recording about how you hear from so many voters that the reason they support you is because you have bills already predetermined and have already put a lot of thought into this that they're not seeing from other candidates. So would love to just hear your thoughts on that. But also I'm curious kind of where you came up with your campaign strategy. Why was it even policy focused in the first place?
Yeah. So the straw poll took 53% of the votes. Durden Copeland had 35. Soletta Holloway and Vincent Dixie both had 6. So there's some big gaps there, right? 18 points above the next person, Durden Copeland. And I specifically even had people coming up to me after the straw poll naming, hey, I came in voting for Durden. I'm leaving having voted for you and wanting a yard sign, wanting a hat, wanting, to rep you the best that I can. And the thing that they named over and over was, it was clear that you came prepared. It was clear that you took this seriously. It was clear that you have thought about these issues that are near and dear to our hearts and are prepared to actually address them. And so the reason I kind of got into this is that I am a very detailed individual. It's one thing to be able to say, hey, I want to fight for a lower healthcare cost.
Sure.
It's another to say, this is exactly how we are going to achieve getting the median household to pay $50 a month for all of their healthcare needs.
Yep.
And it's a universal healthcare plan, like I've proposed in my bills. And that's the difference that people are really clinging to, right?
Sure.
It's the fact that when others are saying hey, I'm going to fight for this, every Democrat is fighting for affordability. Every Democrat is fighting to end the war in Iran. Every Democrat is doing these things. It's a question of how and how far you're taking that as well.
Yep. Yeah, it almost reminds me, I know we kind of all made fun of Trump. This was forever ago now when he said it, but someone in a debate or something, someone asked him about his plan for addressing healthcare, and he said that he had concepts of a plan. Yeah. And we all gave him crap for it, deservedly so, but it feels like some people on the Democratic side in all levels of, from local all the way up to federal, kind of have that mindset without saying it out loud. It is, well, we want to address healthcare, but we have a rough idea, but if it's not this one solution that Republicans are never going to agree to, then we don't know what else to do. So I imagine that voters appreciate the actual plan rather than the concept of a plan.
Well, and it's a plan that isn't set in stone either, right? I have always said to voters, to constituents, that these are plans that I have written from my own perspective and that I, by myself, am not perfect.
Sure.
And so I'm always listening to people as they're offering pieces of hey, well, what if you tweaked it this way? Have you considered this? Hey, I'm actually a nurse, and one thing you forgot is...
Sure.
And so I'm constantly listening and constantly updating these so that they are truly representative of Tennessee 7 and the solutions that people want to see.
Yeah, which I'm sure is obviously evident to the voters, given the results from straw polls and just other things that you have been seeing.
Yeah.
And I guess to kind of go along with that, and this is just conjecture, this could, who knows? There's no way for me to prove this, but your platform being for all of TN7, and you constantly preach this message of it's not left versus right, it's top versus bottom. It's the 1% versus the rest of us. And so I imagine that helps, draw just the people who are tired of this political divide that we can't seem to escape. But I'm also curious how you go about, because you've talked about, getting people wearing a MAGA hat to then vote for you in a straw poll or agree with a point that you're making. So how do you go about navigating that balance when the political divide is so heavy right now, and we are in a system that it's a two-party system. There's a left and there is a right, whether you like it or not. So how do you go about kind of navigating that as part of your campaign?
So it's a fair question. And it's one that I think the fact is that I start by everything that I am promoting, everything I talk about is centered on this wealth inequality in our country, right? I, from the get-go, am not trying to address any direct cultural politics.
Sure.
Right. And that's not to say like I will stand 10 toes on business. Someone asked me like, well, what's your view on trans rights? Trans rights are human rights.
Sure.
Like, I'm not going to walk away from that. I'm not going to like abandon individuals and people that need our support. But I also remind people the trans population in America is less than 1%.
Sure.
90% of Americans are struggling to pay rent, to pay their hospital bills, to buy groceries. So we can sit here and talk about this 1%, and you're never going to change my mind. I'm never going to change your mind on it. Or we can actually talk about the thing that affects everyone. And a lot of times that's typically all you need to like get people to like move on. Sometimes though, you need a bit more. And what I find is looking for the person's motive behind that, right? I was speaking to someone the other day who told me, well, I don't believe in trans rights. And then they walked it back to, well, I just don't think anyone under the age of 18 should be getting trans surgery.
Sure.
And I was like, well, that doesn't happen in America.
Yeah.
So the fact that like that's the line you want to draw, that line's already there.
Yeah.
Like you're inventing a problem that doesn't exist.
Sure.
And, kind of as we start getting into that, he was like, oh, okay, like I didn't realize that. I'm like, yeah, realistically, 99.9% of the time in America, when we're talking about a trans youth, they are taking a hormone blocker that the second they get off of, puberty hits and they go through regular puberty just like any other kid does.
Yep.
And they were just like, oh, well, is that like, who decides on that? I'm like, well, that's their parents' decision. That's the doctor's decision. That is the kid's decision. That is their personal choice. So if we're going to talk about personal liberties, like that is their liberty to do so. And it's not harming them in any way, shape, or form. And we know statistically that when we offer these services, suicide rates in LGBTQ children drops.
Yep.
So if we're going to sit here and say that we care about these kids and we want what's best for them, what I want is for them to be comfortable in their own skin and not to have thoughts of self-harm.
Yep.
And the next thing you know, the person's like, oh, okay, well, no, that's fair. And so it's this thing where it's like, it comes down to the voter education of it, right? Actually like talking through things, understanding why that person feels that way and having that conversation. Does that work 100% of the time? No.
But it never will. I mean, that's people are people, right? We're all going to differ in some respects.
I had someone, and it's on social media, and people on social media are.
It's social media.
Social media. But he took. I recently got endorsed, or not endorsed, but I got certified by the Moms Demand Action, for having gun safety. And so I posted about that, and this guy gets on there and he's like, well, you saying that you want common sense gun reform, it's just code for you want open borders. And I'm like, please walk me through like step A and step Z, because
there's a lot of jumps in there.
Yeah. And then he just starts like calling me names. And I'm like, I'm going to tell you the same thing I tell my students, which is conversations have to be based on respect. And if you're not going to respect me, this conversation's over.
Yeah.
And he starts in on the whole, well, you're running for office, so you have to answer me. And I'm like, I didn't block him. I didn't delete the comments.
Yeah.
I was just like, I'm just not going to engage with you. I told you I wouldn't if you weren't going to be respectful. You're not being respectful. I'm still a human being and deserve respect.
And I'm sure you mentioned your background as a teacher. Being a teacher, I'm sure helps with that, if educating voters and knowing how to just approach a conversation where you are educating someone on something without necessarily making their ego feel bruised or engage in an actual conversation, like you said.
I recently did a radio talk show with Justin of Dixon County Times down in Dixon County. And he was like, you have such a unique way of explaining these. I went into like 4 of my bills. He was like, you have such a unique way of explaining this. I was like, Justin, I'm a teacher.
It's your job.
And he's like, oh, that makes so much sense.
Yeah.
Like, and that's, I think that's a unique property that translates into going to Congress, right? Because being able to take some of these very complex issues and kind of really get to the meat of them and talk about them in ways that is accessible to the everyday human being makes it really easy to kind of like follow and therefore get involved in it and get engaged with it. And I think it's something that we need to see more of in Congress.
I agree. Sometimes you listen to Congress people and it's almost hard to tell if they are avoiding a question or just trying to use flowery language to answer it so it feels like they answered it without actually answering the question. So I'm sure voters in general appreciate a politician they can understand what they're talking about. Because that's not typical, I would say, for most politicians.
No.
So we will get into this in a second. I want to come back to you mentioned being open to revising your bills from input and stuff, and we will get there in a second, but a question before that. So a couple weeks ago, I believe it was, you did an Ask Me Anything on Reddit.
Yeah.
And if you guys have not seen it, I will post a link to the Reddit thread in this description. It was people asked great questions. There were great responses. So feel free to read through that whole thread to learn more. But there is a user, and I will shout them out, give them credit. Rocket Past 6 asked a lot of it. It was kind of about 5 questions in one that they asked, and you answered all of them. But there were some answers you had to their post that I just wanted to follow up on, expand, give you an opportunity to speak more to. So one of the questions that Rocket Past 6 asked in their block of questions was which committees you would want to kind of focus on and which ones you would want to be involved in. And your top 3 answers, or your answer providing your top 3 committees, were you said you would want to do the Ways and Means Committee, the Armed Services Committee, and the Financial Services Committee. And I'm just curious why those 3.
Yeah. So let's start with Ways and Means. Ways and Means within Congress truly is kind of the apparatus that drives what is being talked about in the first place. And that is so much in line with what my campaign was, right? In politics, there is this term called the Overton window. For those of you unfamiliar with this, the idea of the Overton window is what is culturally acceptable to talk about. And when we talk about things like universal healthcare, right? Universal healthcare is now supported by 61% of Americans.
Yep.
If you go back 10 years ago, any politician running on universal healthcare was basically guaranteed to be run out of DC. And so the Overton window has shifted on that.
Sure.
Right? It's moved. And so by being on the Ways and Means Committee, that is access into literally being able to say, this is what we're going to talk about. And putting someone in there who very much wants to push that into a very populist, worker-centered message, I think is something we don't often get in Congress. We have so many Congress people on both sides, left and right, who are taking corporate PAC money, taking APAC money, and they only want to talk about what is best for their lobbyist friends.
Yep.
I don't take lobbyist money. I never will. I have no interest in being friends with these people.
Sure. I
care about the workers. And so by being in that committee, I'm able to kind of drive the ship a bit more. I will name, like, that's a very ambitious thing for a freshman congressman to be asking for. But I also believe if you don't ask for something, you're seldom given it. Yeah. So the second one, the armed services, as a veteran, I think that I have a very unique perspective on what veterans face, right? The fact that I was able to access the VA home loan, but all the things that I didn't realize went into it.
Sure.
The VA hospital access, all these different types of things.
Mhm.
And so being able to stand on that committee and be able to kind of like help veterans out would be something that I would love to do. And not to mention, right, we live in Tennessee 7 has an above average amount of veterans.
Mhm.
And so to me, that'd be a natural ask to be like, hey, I live in a district that has more veterans than typical.
Yeah.
So if anyone's going to be on this and being able to kind of dictate what goes on, it should be someone representing those veterans.
Mhm.
And then the last one, right? Finance. A lot of my bills are designed to be self-funded. I say a lot of them, all of them are. Every single one of them is designed that if they function and have the tax collection that is built into the bill, they will not send us into a deficit. The truth is that we have the means to run a government here without ever going into a deficit. One, Democrats have done it many times before. It's typically Republicans that run up the debt.
Mhm.
But two, like even within Democrats, like if we never push to have higher taxes on the 1%, taxes more reminiscent of what they paid under Eisenhower in the 50s, then we're never going to see our debt paid off. And that is
Sure.
something that, as millennials, like that hangs over our head.
Mhm.
I have friends who are having kids that they're like, this is something that's going to impact my kids so much.
Yep.
17% of our budget right now goes to paying just the interest on these loans.
Yeah. It's
And
wild.
as it continues to grow, that's only going to get bigger and bigger
Yep.
and bigger. And so being able to kind of sit in there and be like, hey, y'all, this is enough
Mhm.
is enough. We can have the nice things and pay this debt off.
Mhm.
We just need to start telling the billionaire class, enough is enough. You're paying your fair share. Don't want to hear Elon Musk whining about it.
Sure. And I think those are all, when I read your response to that question in the Reddit thread, I was like, knowing what I know about your bills, those three make sense. No,
Yeah.
just know, especially the finance one, like you said, like so many of yours revolve around, well, how are we going to fund this? Well, taxes. And
Yeah.
so being involved in the financial discussions, I think makes a lot of sense for the bills that you're proposing.
Yeah.
So another question from that same user,
Mhm.
the kind of the gist of what they were getting at in their whole block of questions was really, all of these bills sound great. And even if everyone in TN7 is 100% on board, that doesn't mean you get to Congress and pass all of these day one.
Yeah.
That's just not the reality of how our government works. And apologies, this is kind of a long quote, but I pulled out some of your responses to that. So these are kind of pieced together. But your response to that question was, we have to be realistic about what the current political field looks like and what can be realistically done, but that never means abandoning a better vision for tomorrow. I will never vote to take away the rights of my constituents in any form. I don't need my version of a housing bill or transportation bill to pass today, but I will need a bill to be moving in the right direction before I would vote for it. So that big long quote was, I like the approach to it. And I do generally agree with the concept of, don't let perfect be the enemy of good. And like, we need to leave things better than we found them, even if we aren't the ones that see the benefits. The future generations, it is our responsibility to help them.
Yeah.
That being said, you were talking about the Overton window. You were talking about compromises and all of this again sounds great. But when we're talking about an administration that just kind of does whatever they want right now, what does a compromise look like when Trump will hold a bill hostage on his desk until Congress passes the SAVE Act? And what does incremental progress look like when Trump is trying to primary out all of these Republicans that are the ones that have been willing to compromise to replace them with loyalists who won't compromise?
Yeah.
How do you envision yourself, I guess, approaching that kind of conflict if elected?
Yeah. And so this is where something one of my primary opponents said comes into play. Darden Copeland at the Bellevue Democrats meeting this month said, well, I believe that if elected, myself and Democrats need to play defense. And I disagree.
Sure.
I think that Democrats are on track to take the House and have a really good chance of taking the Senate as well.
Sure.
Now is the time for Democrats to go on this offense. And what I mean by that is they need to be putting up bills that are so common sense and so clearly good for the people that when Trump vetoes them and when the Republicans vote no on them, we get to hold them accountable.
Sure.
We get to say, hey, this was going to provide health care for every single American. It was going to save the average American $10,000 a year. It was going to increase funding to rural hospitals. It was going to, by proxy downstream, all that money that's saved turns into revenue for small businesses and all these great things, right? So why aren't you passing it?
Yeah.
And then we get to hold Republicans accountable, right? It's this idea of if we just play defense for the next 2 years, nothing gets done. And then Republicans get to point the finger and say, Democrats do nothing. If we go on the offensive, if Democrats go on the offense and say, we are going to be pushing for every single populist bill that 80% of the country agrees with, right? Banning stock trades for politicians. Guarantee you, 80% of Americans want to see this done. If a Democratic Congress passes that and then Trump vetoes it, that is everything we get to then say in 2028. This is the reason we need more Democrats in the House, in the Senate, and in the White House. So the question of like, where do I accept compromise? Where do I accept like not being there? It depends on each and every bill.
Sure.
Right? There's no one answer that covers them all. But I think the premise needs to be this. If I cannot come home to TN7 and explain in good faith why I voted on a bill, I have no business voting on that bill. And so that's a promise I've made with constituents here, is that during my recess time, when I'm back here, I plan on holding town halls and I plan on being accountable to my constituents. I voted on this bill for this reason. I didn't vote on this bill for this reason. You tell me if I was right or wrong. But there's so many times where politicians accept bills that on the surface look good and then deep down, buried into the hundreds of pages of them, there's something horrific there. I think I talked about it the last time I was here, but forgive me, I've been on so many shows.
No worries.
But right, it's the farm bill that Matt Van Epps voted on. And on the surface, there's so many good things about this farm bill. But then you get to this specific part that talks about how people can no longer sue Bayer for making them sick and giving them cancer. And to me, that is literally the type of thing I'm talking about. The type of thing where I would pause and be like, this is not right. This has crossed that threshold. I am no longer voting for this until you strip this out. Now, if we're talking a universal healthcare bill where instead of using my progressive tax platform where the first $50,000 you make, you get taxed 0.5%, the next 50 is 1%, and then every 100K over that goes up by 1%, right? So that's where the median household making $85,000 pays $600 a year, $50 a month. That's a lot of numbers. I know. You can rewind and
we'll link to your website. They can read the bill, all that good stuff.
But right, that's different than, say, Bernie Sanders wanted a flat rate of 2%.
Sure.
Right? So am I going to sit there and be like, well, I'm not going to vote yes on universal health care because you went with a different tax system than mine? No. Absolutely not. Am I going to fight to get mine, or to, at the very least, have someone justify to me why the other one's better so that I can go to my constituents and say, hey, I compromised here, but this is why. So yeah, can a freshman congressman do a lot? Well, you can't do anything you don't try,
Yep.
right? And so that's my plan, is to be, if you want a Democrat who's just going to sit there and just vote with the party and just toe the line, vote for one of my primary opponents. If you want a Democrat who's actually going to step in there and say, I don't care if this is my first day in office, my constituents sent me here to get this done.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to be fighting for this nonstop. And whoever the Speaker of the House is at the time, call me annoying. I don't care. I
Sure.
really don't. I have 100 teenagers a year calling me annoying.
Yeah, you're used to that.
Right? Like, go ahead. I care about the results. And the results are what is going to be best for the constituents and the people of Tennessee 7.
Yeah. And I think you touched on it, that, if Trump were to veto a lot of these things that say a Democratic Congress gets through, hopefully that inspires people to vote in 2028 for more Democrats as proof of this is why we need to elect Democrats. So I think also incremental progress can look like not just within a bill, but over election cycles, of similar to what we saw with Afton in the special election, of she closed a huge gap that hopefully now, if there is a gap this time, it'll be even smaller. If not, the Democrats come out the winners this time. So,
and there's a whole math equation to be talked about there, right? The old Tennessee 7 pre-redistricting was according to the Cook Political Index, was an R plus 22. Now, the new Tennessee 7 is considered an R plus 11. Now, we do have to understand these are different demographics, right? They shifted. But Acton Bain took the R plus 22 down to a 9-point win by Van Epps. So that's 13 points.
Yeah.
If any of the Democrats can do that now, that's Democrats winning by 2.
Yep.
And that's massive. And with the war in Iran only continuing, with, these scandals that are coming out left and right with Republicans, with, is Mitch McConnell even alive?
Who knows at this point?
And so, like, it's all this stuff where we're going to see Democrats win. I just don't want to see Democrats win and we receive nothing for it.
Exactly. And that leads to kind of my final real question. As a woman, I have had my fair share of experiences of voting for the lesser of two evils. And I know there are a lot of the queer community, the Black community, just people of color in general have, for a lot of history, have been left with this choice of vote for the person who's not really going to do anything for me, but at least it's not the person that's going to actively campaign against my rights.
Yeah.
So what would you say, I guess, to just, and I think you kind of touched on this with your comment about going in and fighting, and the only way you find out is by asking. But if there's anything you want to touch on specifically to any of the women, queer community, people of color, just anything you want to say to voters who are maybe concerned that, great, we're just going to get another white guy in office has all these, grand plans, and then gets in office and all we see is more of the same.
Yeah. So a little bit of people always confuse me for a history teacher.
Sure.
I am an English teacher, I promise you. But that being said, let's go back to 1776. Right? Our founding fathers established this country as a democratic republic. The whole notion of a democratic republic is people vote for the person who then represents them. When this occurred, women didn't have the right to vote.
Yep.
People of color didn't have the right to vote. Even white individuals who owned no land didn't have a right to vote. In fact, only around 6% of the colony's population had the right to vote under our founding fathers, under the establishment of this democracy. But that was an expansion, right? Let's be honest. Were the founding fathers perfect? No. No human being is. We're not going to idolize these men and say that they were perfect when they weren't. We know that they've made many mistakes. Seriously, George Washington, only won one battle in his whole military career.
Yes.
He just happened to win the right battle.
Yep.
But these individuals expanded democracy from a monarchy where merely the king had the rule to 6%,
Mm-hmm.
right? And then as time marches on, we have the Civil War. After the Civil War, Black men were given the right to vote. In a lot of places, that was kind of fought back on,
Sure.
right? When we saw voter suppression via voting taxation, when we saw
Mm-hmm.
literacy test,
Sure.
the grandfather clause is literally from this era, right?
Mm-hmm.
This whole, oh, I was grandfathered into this, that was literally designed for allowing whites to vote and keeping blacks from
Yep.
voting. But we did see an expansion of democracy.
Mm-hmm.
Time marches on. The suffragette movement,
Yep.
the 19th Amendment to the Constitution, women gained the right to vote. Time marches on. The Civil Rights Movement, the John Lewis's Voters' Rights Act. We saw the expansion of democracy once more. And that is what I think is so beautiful about this country, is that we are not a perfect country. And while some of us might sit there and try and pretend that we are, I am not one of those people. I think back to the preamble of our Constitution, in which it says the words, in order to make a more perfect union. Our founding fathers understood. They didn't say, in order to make the perfect union
Mm-hmm.
more perfect, right? You pair that with Benjamin Franklin. There's the famous quote from Benjamin Franklin where he came out of the constitutional not trial. Gosh, I'm blanking on words. Y'all, I've been
It's been
campaigning
a
all
long
day.
day.
But he comes out of the Constitutional Convention, and allegedly a young man comes up to him and says, "Sir, what type of government do we have?" And his response was, "A democracy if you can keep it." And we've watched that expand,
Mm-hmm.
and we've watched it kind of ebb and flow. But as we zoom out, it has expanded and expanded and expanded. And that is something that I think is so beautiful about this country. The fact that people can come here and join in, right? America is not America because it is white. America is not America because it is Christian. America is not America for any of these identity reasons. America is America because it is a democracy that continuously strives to get better.
Mm-hmm.
And when democracy literally is people power, right? Demos being Latin for people, cracy being power.
Mm-hmm.
Literally, democracy translates to people power.
Yep.
And that is something that I hold dear to my heart. That is something that I think is so beautiful about this country. There was the poet in the early 1900s, Langston Hughes, who had a poem, Let America Be America Again. And very much that poem, Langston Hughes was a black man living in the early 1900s, Jim Crow. It was him literally saying, I understand that America is meant to be this beautiful thing, but it never has been for me because I am a black man under Jim Crow.
Mm-hmm.
But I still believe in the potential of it.
Sure.
And that is something that I would say to people who question, well, you're another white man. I am.
Sure.
I am.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not
Yeah.
denying that. But at the same time, I believe democracy only functions when everyone has a voice, and everyone has a voice when everyone is equal and everyone has the same rights.
Mm-hmm.
And so that is why again and again and again, I will say, I am not the person to elect if you want to see someone's rights go away. I'm the person to elect if you want to see rights expanded. I believe for women, right? I had someone ask me this question. I get a lot of emails and I try to answer all of them that I can. But someone did email me. She was like, hey, I didn't see anything about like women reproduction rights on your website. Like, can you talk about that? And I was like, absolutely. I believe that women should have a right to choose what happens with their body. No man wants the government telling them what they can and cannot do with their body.
Sure.
Why are we forcing that onto half of the human species?
Yeah.
That's ridiculous. What do I think? I had someone asking me, well, what about America being a Christian nation? John Adams, our first vice president and second president in the Treaty of Tripoli, signed Article 11, which stated this country is in no way founded as a Christian nation.
Yep.
America is not a Christian nation. There may have been Christians as our founding fathers, but that does not make the nation Christian. And in fact, our first Bill of Rights is literally stating the right of religion.
Yes.
And so while you always have the right to practice your religion your way, you never have the right to project that onto others. When I have people of color asking me, like, well, Josh, are you going to stand up for us? Or are you going to, take the easy way out? And my answer is this. I was the first candidate in TN7 to say abolish ICE. I am the candidate who I've talked with people about, my education bill, the Open Door Act. One of the components of it is full public student loan forgiveness. And I had people who were like, well, Josh, Biden tried that and he couldn't even get 30,000 passed. So why are you going for more than that? And my answer to them was this. Biden didn't pass it because literally the court said this is something Congress has to do. So one, there's that.
Yeah.
But two, the reason that I'm pushing for more than 30,000 is that I think 30,000 was a racist number. And I think it's a racist number because that is what the data shows us.
Sure.
The average white student holds about 30,000 in student loan debt. The average black student holds about 50,000 in student loan debt. So if we're talking about only like partial student loan forgiveness, we're really only helping white students. And I'm not interested in just helping half of a population.
Sure.
I want to help the whole population. And so it's stuff like that, right? Where I'm like, hey, no, absolutely. Like, it's fair to say, hey, am I just voting for another white man who's going to side with all the other white men? It's a fair and valid question to ask. I understand why people are asking that because time and time again, that's what they've run into. And the answer is, when I say I want to be held accountable by my constituents, I want to be held accountable by my constituents. And that includes women. That includes the LGBTQ community. That includes people who are not Christian. That includes people of color. That includes everyone who lives in TN7. And honestly, anyone who lives even outside of TN7. Because I'm looking to do what's best for the working class. The only people that I don't care to listen to, Wall Street.
Fair.
Like, these are the people who have gotten us into this mess. I'm so tired of hearing, oh, the Dow Jones is over 50,000. Cool. People can't afford housing. Like, what?
Yeah,
why are we celebrating that
Yeah.
when everyone else in the economy, the top 10% own 93% of Wall Street? I say that again. The top 10% of Americans own 93% of all stocks. So when they talk about Wall Street's doing great, awesome.
That's the top 10%.
That's the top 10%.
Great.
When we talk the top 50% own 99%. So the bottom 50% of Americans, we're talking 170 million plus Americans, only own 1% of Wall Street. I don't care how Wall Street is doing. I care about how Springfield, Tennessee is doing. I care about how Greenbrier is doing. I care about Pegram, Kingston Springs, Bellevue, Coopertown, Hartsville, like the towns and cities that are here, the people that are here, not some CEO's bank account.
Yeah, I mean, I think I talked in my interview with Lori Bergman, we talked about how much different Congress would be if Congress people actually were involved in their constituents' lives and knew what was going on. So, I mean, even just being aware of, the veteran population of TN7, I would be curious to ask Matt Van Epps if he knows how much of the percentage of TN7 is a veteran. Like just being in tune with your constituents helps inform you and helps, make better decisions going forward. If you do, come back year one and we say, hey, what are you doing? We don't, we don't like this. And just being open to that feedback, I think really helps build that trust of even if you can't convince Congress to agree with you, at least we trust that you're fighting for what we want you to fight for.
Yeah. No, exactly. And I think tonight will be my third time coming to a Robertson County Democratic Party meeting over the past 6 months,
Sure.
right? So that's every other month.
Yep.
I've been to the other county party meetings. I'm constantly trying to be with the people because I've said again and again and again, you cannot represent people you don't know. And so that is something I look forward to. I've even said post primary, should I be the Democratic nominee, I will reach out to the Republican Party and ask, hey, can I come to your meetings? Can I come talk with you guys? Because whether you guys like it or not, if I become your congressperson, I'm your congressperson. Now, does that mean I'm going to like roll over and start doing everything Republicans want? No, not at all.
Sure.
What it means is I want to hear from both sides so that I can do what's best. And there's times, right? A lot of people you named earlier, like the fact that my bills are self-funded was something that like you looked at. And that's partially because one, it just makes sense to like be able to say this is funded, this is taken care of. But it's also because I wanted to stand the test of Republicans. And the first thing a Republican's going to do is, well, that's adding to the deficit. Cool. I've already thought about that. I've already addressed it. This is how we're going to make sure it doesn't, by taxing the 1% in this particular way.
Well, I could probably keep asking you questions all day long, but I think we're right around at time. So I will wrap it up with our last question is always a softball of how can people find you if they want to learn more, if they want to donate, volunteer, all that good stuff. How can they find you?
So I always point people first to my website, Sales for Congress, SALES, the number 4 Congress.com. On there, you can find links to all my social media. You can find my campaign email. You can find all that type of stuff, whether you want to donate, whether you want to volunteer. And one thing I heavily stress is if you want to donate, you can. What I prefer is people volunteer. I understand that people have only so much money these days, right? If you have the money to donate, feel free to. If you are the person who's like, well, I could give $20, but like I don't know if that's enough. I honestly would rather you spend an hour talking with your friends and family about why you're voting for me and convince them to also vote in the primary for me or in the general for me than to give me the $20. Like that goes so much further. And I don't need that money if I have the volunteers. So by all means, volunteer. Check me out on social media. I'm on Facebook and Instagram are the main two that I'm doing just because I'm a millennial and that's what we do.
Yep, that's the ones we use.
But I am very active on them, right? If you ask a question on the comments, if you DM me, if you email me, you should get a response no more than 48 hours.
Awesome. Well, to all of our listeners, thank you so much. And if you want to hear more from Josh, check out the episode we did. It's a couple months ago now. I can't remember the exact day, but it was a couple months ago. Or you can also go check out, we have a recording of that Democratic candidate forum that we were talking about earlier on our YouTube channel. So you can hear more from Josh and all the other candidates in that video. But thank you again, Josh, for coming on. It was great to have you again. And to all of our listeners, thank you so much. And we'll see you next week.
Thanks, y'all.